You're listening to ayahuascapodcast.com. First, explain to people what is epigenetic changes and how can ayahuasca change your genome and should people worry?
Epigenetics is the kind of upregulation or downregulation of certain genes over time impacted by environment and life and experience. Most of the time when we see kind of epigenetic changes, it happens over a long period of time. It's very incremental, but then sometimes big events will then happen in your life to change the course of it, and then that will get encoded into your DNA. And one of the things that we have been finding is even on a relatively small samples, starting to see changes in the genes, so on the genetic level. So basically, ayahuasca and that ceremony being that big kind of catalyst to that change. And right now, even I think the first study we looked at, we had about 60 people, and we were already seeing some upregulation and methylation of the sigma-1 gene related to trauma. So for example, related to kind of encoding of memory and recall and emotional regulation, previously kind of done in kind of rat studies and things. Right now, we are on the process of expanding that because essentially genetic studies typically require numbers of up to the hundreds before you can statistically confidently say that this change is actually happening. So more research is definitely required in this area. One interesting thing is when we spoke to the curanderos about the epigenetic side of the study, obviously they weren't kind of familiar with DNA, so we're just kind of explaining it. And then Don Rono, our maestro who we've been working with, he was basically that makes a lot of sense and is exactly what I've been doing in ceremony. This sense of kind of clearing ancestral lines and straightening those ancestral lines.
Hi guys, and welcome to Ayahuasca Podcast. As always, with you the host Sam Believ. Today, I'm having a conversation with Tsang Waifung, also known as Waifung Tsang. Waifung is a clinical psychologist, researcher, and co-founder of Onaya Sciences. He bridges Western science with indigenous healing, working with ayahuasca, trauma, and sound-based therapies. Waifung is also an advisor to Heroic Hearts UK and a TEDx speaker exploring the intersection of psychology, psychedelics, and traditional wisdom. This episode is sponsored by La Huayra Ayahuasca Retreat. At La Huayra, we combine affordability, accessibility, and authenticity. La Huayra, connect, heal, grow. Guys, I'm looking forward to hosting you. Waifung, welcome to the show. How did you like my pronunciation of your name?
It was perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, it was really good. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, that one's it's a hard one for most people.
Yeah, because in Asian languages, it's not just the way you say it, it's also no, it's very musical. But yeah, I can imitate it, but then I'll probably forget it very quickly. Waifung, tell us about yourself a little bit, your story. How did you end up in this line of work, researching ayahuasca?
Yeah. It's been quite a journey, I would say. I guess my interests kind of started in psychedelics, kind of more widely. I'm a musician, so I play a lot of music, and in the musical space, often there is drug use is such a commonplace as well, and kind of being more exposed to kind of psychedelics at festivals and things, and then throughout my psychology career, became really interested in the research that's coming out and just the amazing kind of data that it was looking, especially when I was feeling really kind of disillusioned in my practice as well with what we had to, just a lot of things that we're taught or made to do in clinical practice that I just really didn't sit right with me. And then it was a process of serendipity, meeting some really good friends along the way. And it was, meeting a psychiatrist, Dr. Simon Ruffle, who was a psychiatrist and also psychologist on the on a team working in a hospital who had been, traveling to Peru and basically was like, oh my God, you have to come check this out. This is amazing. And then sat with a curandero for the first time that had been training in Peru, and then were just completely blown away by the results. And at that time, going to the center, the Ayahuasca Foundation, the Riosbo kind of research center in Iquitos, Peru, in the heart of the Amazon, they had kind of built this like research and retreat center, but no one was really properly doing the research there. And we were just like, we'll do the research. We would love to do that. And that was like 10 years ago. And since then, we've just never really looked back. I thought a little bit about this the other day, kind of just like, at that time when we first started researching ayahuasca, just thinking, maybe that's just like that one time we'll be doing this. But then as we just dug more and more into the rabbit hole, just kind of kept going deeper and deeper, especially for me, the whole in all the intersections with the different other kind of aspects of my life, especially with music, with the use of the Icaros, with that very kind of like surgical use of sound, with the intersections with plant medicine and Chinese medicine, and having that kind of like basis for that in my own upbringing and the culture behind it. And like really a big part of our research is really to focus on indigenous uses of ayahuasca and really upholding that tradition and retaining the ceremony, the ritual, and the whole context around it. That's kind of what really kept me involved, and it's really become a lifestyle.
Thank you for sharing. I see definitely lots of parallels between your journey and my own, the disillusionment and the serendipity or synchronicity. And it's very, very common with the guests that I interview. It's just this thing that kind of happens to you and just grabs you, and then the rabbit hole effect of it all. It's actually very interesting that we have a couple points of touch, but the way I found you was very interesting. So we have a map at my retreat, which is called Loara. We have a map where people live pins where they're from. And I was looking at the map and I was like, we have less people from China than we have people from Curacao, which is like a tiny island in Caribbean. And I was like, why is that? And I was like, so I went to ChatGPT and I looked like, are there any Chinese people that talk about psychedelics? And there were a few people, and I think you were the only one that had Instagram. So I reached out to you. But as I was getting ready for this interview, I was also I realized that you are from Onaya Sciences, and I interviewed Ian McCall about ayahuasca and traumatic brain injury. So and I believe he mentioned Onaya Sciences. He even mentioned that I should interview you guys. So, but I kind of, basically, I was destined to speak to you anyway in some point of time. And there's definitely those very interesting topics about like music and Chinese medicine. It's all in my list of questions already. So, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's start with this main topic that drew me to you. It's like, why is there such a huge country, China? I mean, I know you're from Hong Kong, but still, it's kind of still, I believe, still one country, right? Why is it so huge, but why is there so little people that, let's say, are traveling to Amazon to drink ayahuasca? Like, I want to talk about, what is it different about Asia that people are maybe not interested in, or maybe there's a cultural difference? Yeah. Anything you want to tell about this?
Yeah, where do I start? That's an interesting question. Well, firstly, I'm happy to represent kind of like the Chinese Hong Kong side of the world. And you're very right. I think that, I read somewhere around kind of like people who have been looking at the kind of anthropology and globalization of psychedelics and ayahuasca. And yeah, there's just this kind of void almost in China. And yeah, I think there might be like a few reasons for that. Why is so much of it doesn't exist? A lot of it political, I think. Obviously, there's the firewall, and there is a lot of information blockage in China that stops everything going in and stops everything going out, and everything kind of becomes filtered. And then the political running of the people as well. I think a lot of it might have to do with maybe like the Industrial Revolution that was happening at the end of the 70s, that kind of like finished, and how actually a lot of spirituality and a lot of kind of religious acts, or even kind of like ancient kind of Chinese philosophies, got kind of really pushed down and suppressed, and it became very illegal to even kind of hold gatherings. So people had to do it really on the sly and had to be really inconspicuous about it. And then after kind of Chairman Mao, and came kind of new leadership, and that's when kind of more Confucianism and kind of Buddhism and kind of like more spiritual activity was able to kind of surface a little bit more. And I think right now we're also, because of that, is kind of like impacted how people approach it, or how much it kind of gets spread, and how people can go in with the knowledge as well. And just as I'm talking about that, this is like an ongoing theme in Chinese history, where they just have a knack to try to erase the story and erase the history. And obviously there's the whole Qin dynasty thing, where did you know about China used to be like seven states, and then it got kind of united into one country, and then in that uniting they killed all the scholars and burnt all the books and just like refreshed everything. Like when you go through China, the Terracotta Army and stuff, they're slowly kind of digging it up and finding that they actually have so much of this technology that people are finding out recently that they've had known for such a long time, but they just got completely destroyed, and then people had to re-find it. And I know in kind of Chinese history, thinking about psychedelic use, there has been some mention of it in some literature. There are some kind of like old poems that mention the use of kind of mushroom and very kind of mythical things happening. And then, mentions of psychedelics and like old literature from like a long time ago. Like we're talking like Tang Dynasty, Han Dynasty, like I think it's like 200 BCE or something, like really old. And that's kind of like from a lot of those more Taoist alchemists kind of uses of psychedelics. But then, again, all this literature just kind of got buried, and people had to be so inconspicuous. And even now, right? Because like fast forward to today, people, when they run ceremonies, and I know of these circles kind of going on in China and in Hong Kong, is very kind of like encrypted apps, is kind of like word of mouth, is really kind of just very underground if they had to do it, and often kind of run by like expats or foreigners who kind of bring the knowledge in. It's a very interesting topic, how that happens. And another thing that kind of really kind of like is I find it super interesting is there's so much intersection between the psychedelic space and what's like in Chinese history, especially when you think about like Chinese mythology and like Buddhism and like Taoism, and there's so much kind of overlap of things that just lends itself so well to the psychedelic space. And like even thinking about the story of the Monkey King or something is so psychedelic. The whole thing is like there must have been, it must have facilitated these ideas at some point, and it just wasn't really well documented.
Or it was documented and then it was just destroyed, but it definitely, there's definitely something there, something very psychedelic, because in one of my recent ceremonies, I was actually becoming a dragon. Like I could see myself becoming. It's like that's very Chinese. So in a way, I only thought about it now when you mentioned that Chinese culture is very psychedelic. Like why dragon? And so many people see dragons in ayahuasca experiences. So there's definitely been something, and there's plenty of pyramids as well, and plenty of things. And like in India, they had Solma or this water lily. In Egypt, they all had their own psychedelics, and China is pretty close to Siberia, and that's where the shamanic traditions of mushrooms are coming from. So they're like surrounded by psychedelics on each direction. So it's like to believe that such a big country with such a deep culture didn't get psychedelics. Like if you really dig deep, anywhere there's like advanced culture and spirituality, you will eventually find psychedelics. Whether external or just internal, like you do. I know you do Tai Chi, for example. Like you can naturally enhance your own psychedelic, perception of things. But like spirituality is psychedelic, in my opinion.
Massively. Oh, and this is something I've been like learning so much from the plants as I've been kind of doing dietas and connecting. For those listening and don't know about dietas, is this process of kind of assimilating with master plants and teacher plants, and essentially in commune with them. And when I've been dieting, one thing that I've really found super helpful is a lot of these Chinese practices that have been embedded in my body. Growing up, like my mom teaches Tai Chi. She does the Tai Chi fan and the sword and stuff. My dad does qigong and stuff like we just grow up with. You wake up at the crack of dawn, there's a bunch of old people just doing Tai Chi in the park, and they love it. They've got their get up, and it's so in the heritage and the lineage, that actually a lot of these practices, when trying to connect, when trying to help connect with my own body, but then also to the ethereal and to the plants and to the spirits, actually having a framework to move with my breath, to move my body, to kind of like track what's happening in my body, and in ways of kind of like meditation and mindfulness, or very kind of Eastern practices. All of these just are such important keys that I've been finding more and more, and it's really coming through my visions, coming through things that are channeled from kind of like past life stuff. It's very Asian. It's almost like Disney in China, sort of Asian. It's super interesting. It's one question that I've been kind of asking as I've tried to figure out, this relationship with plants in the ayahuasca space, like almost like what's in it for the plant. Why do plants want to, what's in it for the plant in building relationships with humans? Obviously, there's the whole kind of like spreading the knowledge and spreading the seed thing. But then also they really want to have a human experience. And in having that human experience, they want to learn about these things that are encoded in your body, encoded in your DNA. And one of the things for me as a person from that lineage is Tai Chi, is meditation, is breath work, is actually mindfulness, and actually bringing those things. It just collaborates so well with everything I'm learning from the indigenous side as well in the Amazon.
Yeah, it's what's in it for plant, and as you said, like spreading it. And recently I interviewed Dennis McKenna, and it was either him or his brother that took ayahuasca from Peru and brought it to Hawaii. So because ayahuasca gave them a good experience, I assume they literally spread it to another part of the continent. So maybe that would definitely explain it. When you talk about like Chinese culture, and my understanding is very limited. So I've been to China once, and I've been to Singapore many times, and there's like a Chinese part, but I mean, my my knowledge of the culture is very limited, but from what I know, in Chinese medicine, there is like understanding of hot foods and cold foods and things like this. And I was really surprised when in Colombian culture, like my wife's mother would be like, "Don't eat a banana because it's cold." And I'm like, "What do you mean it's cold? It's room temperature." But what they mean is like this side of the and shamans say ayahuasca is hot. And in my culture, there is no understanding of hot and cold foods, at least not me growing up. I've never heard about it before. But somehow there is this parallel, and I'm sure Colombian grandmothers, I'm not using Chinese medicine, is just like they have their own indigenous way of knowing it. And like, if you think about it, and if you believe the way humans spread around the planet, it was the Northeast Asians that came through the Bering Strait and went down and populated the Americas. So maybe that knowledge, it was before that, and it kind of came through, because like shamanic chants and like Mongolian throat singing, there's some parallel there. I mean, you see some indigenous people that look very Asian. Like my wife is part indigenous, but she is still like, she has like a very, like her eyes are very Asian looking, in my opinion. Even my kids, like they have very Asian looking eyes. So yeah, anything you explored in that direction?
Yeah, I think like from what you were speaking about first is, I mean, yeah, again, there's so many overlaps, and even kind of like how like ancient kind of like more Chinese practices on kind of reading bodies, reading palms, reading faces, the understanding of qi. And I know exactly what you're talking about. This is something that my mom talks about all the time with the hotness as well. We call it yit hei. Yit hei is like a hot qi. It's like a hot energy that this food gives, or how it's been treated. And then it's quite Ayurvedic, right? Kind of, it's all about balancing, returning everything back to harmony. If it's too hot, or if it's too cold, if it's too much air, or the different elements. And yeah, like that's really at the core of Chinese medicine and a lot of Chinese philosophies. And there's actually, it's super interesting now thinking about it, how I know a lot more about ayahuasca than other psychedelics, just because that's my specialism. But then when you look at how a lot of ceremonies are run now in China, or kind of like in Hong Kong, it really integrates a lot of those teachings into the practice. So for example, bringing kind of Chinese medicine to help balance out the qi in the preparation and the integration. I know some facilitators who like to bring in Chinese herbs into how they make the brew, or they have their own versions of ayahuasca using almost like analogs. Obviously, you know, DMT containing kind of plants that are very high in content. Sang Si Su I need to learn English for that, actually. Sang Si Su is like their version of chacruna and the psychotroph viridis kind of plant, and that's like the version that they use, and bringing a lot of these, more Taoist, more Buddhist ways of working in the preparation and integration, but also in ceremony, and calling in those spirits. I know this guy who always likes to use the what's his name? Guan Yu. There's a story of the three kingdoms in China, and then there's these three guys that kind of led this revolutionary army, and then there's this one guy who's just like so loyal to his family and to his people that they have a statue of him on like most of the altars in China. And then he represents kind of loyalty and solidity and kind of power and strength. And they always kind of put him like in the altar during ceremony and stuff. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And when I'm looking at kind of like indigenous ways of working in the jungle, you know, obviously they're also very kind of, you know, everything is about bringing things back to balance, bringing things back to harmony. Ayurveda. They're, obviously very collectivist as a society, as is China, and have that kind of really core value of community and relational kind of identity forming kind of happens. And obviously that connection with the plants and how it's just all grounded to earth. And, it's super interesting. I would love to kind of be able to conduct research. I mean, it's obviously so much red tape around it in China, but even kind of anecdotally, or what little research there is out there, there's already pointing so much to the vast potential of, using this medicine in this context with the philosophies that are already so embedded in everyone's kind of understanding of the world, that whole understanding of spirit and chi and energy, like and of lineage, and, everywhere you go, like every family you go to in China will have an altar for the ancestors. There will be an altar for the spirits that govern the land locally. And then you will always burn free incense for these spirits. It's just daily practice. When you go for a job interview on the birthday of the Buddha, you would go visit the temple and put some money in the box. And, you want to be on a good side with the spirits and actually straighten your line with energy that's kind of out there, which is exactly how the indigenous people in the Amazon work. Is all about straightening that line, and everything they do is it is not even there's no question that there is spirit involved, and it just permeates, their whole tradition and lifestyle,
Yeah, I mean, a lot of spirituality still survived even the communists, because I come from Latvia that used to be part of Soviet Union, and they kind of came in and destroyed all the religion. So, but some still survives in like the way you speak. Like, for example, even though religion does not exist, something happens, you say, thanks God, not because you are not necessarily religious. And so basically, as I'm understanding, in China, you still have the altars and Tai Chi, and it's kind of slowly coming back, because you can only repress it for that long, because in the end we are spiritual beings, and we will have to find a way to connect with that, because like there's not much meaning without it. Like I personally discovered through ayahuasca. Before that, I was not spiritual, but some people there's many different ways to get there. I mean, you're surprising me, definitely. I thought there was like zero ayahuasca in China, and you say, well, there's actually circles, and at least in Hong Kong and maybe in the mainland China. And you say they also have their own version of pharmahuasca, like let's call it Chinahuasca. Just finding the prerequisite plants that have similar structure and then mixing them. But of course, it's not ever going to be ayahuasca, because there's like so many different compounds on top of MAOI, harmalines and stuff like that. But so it exists, and I was kind of thinking, like, we should. Do you reckon there is a person that speaks about ayahuasca on like Chinese internet, or is it like the great firewall of China is too prohibitive even for that, just to even speak about it?
I know there are encrypted forums that kind of speak about it. It's very hard to access them outside of China, but even in China, it's very hard to access them. You'll need the kind of encryption and the codes. Because obviously the penalty is very strict over there, and they're replaced with a death penalty as well. So people have to be super, super careful. But there is some literature around it. It's very, even those who go off and research it, and people I know, they're very careful about who you can share with, like what you can share. And I've never actually sat in a circle there. I'm very careful about who I sit in ceremony with in general anyway. But I definitely have friends who are very, interested in the area and have been kind of like doing practices in the big cities as well, like kind of Beijing and Shanghai and Shenzhen, and then when you go to Taiwan as well. I have one psychedelic doctor friend who has opened up clinic in Taiwan, is also who kind of talks more openly about it because it's Taiwan. And then yeah, but it's super interesting how because it's so kind of small, but it still needs to be a functional sort of business, right? You still need kind of like people to come through. So it's super interesting how the kind of circles, these sorts of forums where people speak about it kind of like then extends to. And to my surprise sometimes, and it makes a lot of sense when I kind of heard about it, is that often it comes to like business people, like a lot of people who just want to make a lot of money, and they're in that. And that's very Chinese. Like, we love money, we love business, we love kind of making money and serving society in that way. So a lot of the intentions that people then bring to ceremony becomes like, I want to be better at my job. I want to kind of like do better in life and be able to provide for my family. A lot of like very core Chinese sort of values and, you know, filial piety and like, but then, you know, it's just interesting contrast to me to how when in the West, I've been working with so many people for that individual, like, oh, is my spiritual growth, sort of very kind of individualistic sort of approach to it all. So yeah, and that's probably like a remnant of the whole kind of industrial revolution as well. Where you just became more capitalist and money focused. And then how do I then do like a spiritual version of that? Kind of what it looks like now.
This episode is sponsored by Loaira Ayahuasca Retreat. Most of you know Loaira if you've been listening to this podcast for a while. Some of you might have already been to Loaira before. For those who don't know us yet, we started Loaira with my wife 4 years ago. At Loaira, we combine authenticity, accessibility, and affordability. Loaira is currently highest rated ayahuasca retreat in South America with more than 630 5-star reviews and an average rating of 5 stars. If you come to Loaira, you'll experience powerful, authentic ceremonies led by our indigenous shaman, Fernando, in a very beautiful venue just 1 hour south of Medellin, Colombia. We're surrounded by nature and have comforts like hot water, Wi-Fi. At Loaira, our team has guided more than 2,000 people through this life-changing transformation of ayahuasca experience. At the same time, we keep it very affordable. At the moment, we have retreats starting at as low as $645. So whether you're coming for healing, clarity, or a deeper connection to yourself, Loaira is the best choice. If it is your first time drinking ayahuasca, you will love our 3.5-hour preparation course and integration support. All of that is included in price, as well as pickup from Medellin, accommodation, and ayahuasca. There are no hidden fees. Visit loaira.com to book your retreat or learn more. Loaira, connect, heal, grow. LAWAYRA.com. Well, it's good that it exists. It will eventually will grow. There's no stopping, you know, like, you know, we all felt this when you get this experience, you want everyone to know about it, so it will spread. But you mentioned, you know, studies and science. Let's go back to your talk less about China. I think that's we dedicate enough time to it. Let's talk about your science and your scientific career with ayahuasca. So talk to us about your own first ayahuasca experience and why did you decided to dedicate your scientific life to that topic specifically.
It felt quite like a no-brainer, to be honest. Once I kind of found it, you know, like I really, really struggled kind of in the clinic, you know, working in trauma, working in psychosis, like working with modalities that just wasn't really working. Like patients kept coming back, or medications that I found myself in a position where I was literally like having to apologize to my patients for the level of care and the inadequacy of it that we were providing, because it was just clearly like not good. And then And then I went to the jungle. And one thing that really kind of struck out to me actually was like, you know how these indigenous practitioners, when they provide this treatment, there's no doubt in their mind that this is going to work. It's like, this is definitely going to work. You're going to come here and it's going to heal you and it's going to be great, you know, and it's, you know, obviously it plays into that kind of setting and the mindset that you go into it and how powerful of a mediator that is to actual therapeutic change and positive outcome. And then I was like, okay, sure, cool. And then, you know, and then these guys then coming also like, you know, doctors who, you know, jungle doctors, curanderos and shamans coming through and actually be like, you know, bring me anyone. And you know, I came from a very clinical background where, you know, you have specialisms for individual kind of issues and ailments. And then you would then refer to that specialist department. But then first time I meet these doctors of traditional doctors who are like, you know, anyone, I've got something, you know? And so that really kind of like interested me. I do see kind of pros and cons to that as the more I work with indigenous people. In that one, I am super amazed often when conditions that we really struggled with in the West, like not just like, obviously kind of mental and psychological and trauma and all of these things, but then also like really physical ailments, you know, like working with plant medicines, working with jungle medicines, like really severe burns or, you know, and then, but then there is a part of me that also feels like because the indigenous people are in their kind of jungle setting, that sometimes there might be almost like an underestimate of the darkness of the West, or of how deep people have gone and all the different conditions, a lot of ways that different conditions have developed and increased in severity, and then people coming with things that they really never seen before, and then having to then trial these kind of like old ways that they've been working to that setting. So there's definitely, I feel, a very strong place for Western medicine as well. And definitely not up, you know, not holding one belief system or paradigm above the other, you know, for emergency medicine, especially like Western all the way. If I break a leg, I'm going to a hospital, for example. And then one thing that really kind of like struck me about how they work, which was really missing from kind of Western psychology and is often just sided as like alternative therapy, which is art, you know, artisticness. And one thing that I really love about the way the indigenous people work is that they are medics, but they're also artists. They're scientists, but they're also artists. Like the Icaros are a perfect example, you know, is all about the intention behind these words that you sing, behind how well you can build this container, call in the angels, have the fiery swords, get the mountains, like get the guerrilla soldiers and really kind of like build that container, and then leading to very tangible changes in people's experience and long-term outcomes. You know, that's when I really became like, okay, you know, that's really the intersection between the different fields. And I was completely sold, and it was, ever since.
And so basically then you started doing the science, so with the Onaya. So tell us about Onaya, and like what science have you done, and what are you working on right now?
Of course, yeah. Thank you for asking. Yeah, so Onaya have done quite a few bits now over time. Right now, we are working in collaboration with some different organizations. So one is the Heroic Hearts Project. I don't know if you know about Heroic Hearts Project. They're like a veterans kind of charity in the States. They've got different arms now in the UK, in Australia, in Canada, for example. And yeah, working with veterans that have PTSD or diagnosed with traumatic brain injury, and really taking quite a multidisciplinary, holistic approach. So thinking about psychology, but then also neuropsychology, cognitive psychology, thinking about biology as well, the gut microbiome, the epigenetic changes that happen after, looking at stool samples, looking at blood samples, doing kind of like neuroimaging. And then, yeah, we're currently 2 year in a 5-year study with that. Preliminary results are looking very good right now. I think right now, the last time I checked, we do like 1 year follow up with all of the veterans after, and these are really kind of like severe end of the scale when it comes to PTSD, because we do like a 10-day retreat within this study, and a lot of the research, a lot of the retreats that Heroic Hearts work with are kind of like 3 days and shorter, so we reserve the kind of like the more severe end to our study. And then right now we're finding around kind of 84% of people immediately after no longer meeting diagnostic criteria on clinical measures, standardized measures for PTSD, and then sustaining at 6 months. And the 12-month data have recently come in, and it's also kind of like sustaining at that level as well. And then correlating with different changes in the brain and in the gene. And it's really phenomenal kind of seeing this change. And I'm on the ground kind of watching it as well. And the kind of things that I'm sure you see this on your day to day and on your retreats, the kind of things that people come out with, and the level of insight, the stories that they are able to rekindle their relationships with, it's just so moving and beyond anything I've ever seen in an NHS setting, which is, yeah, and I'll be working with patients for years and not be able to see that sort of change. And then for that to sustain as well, you know, speaking to the community that ayahuasca can build, and, you know, the group that you share with, especially for the veterans, actually. Because one thing I really find when working with veterans is that there's something about the brotherhood and the camaraderie of the platoon of the people that you live and die by, especially in a life where you felt so disconnected and you really you yearn for that human connection, and going to the army to find that sense of identity to the army that you bring can really bring these groups together more so than non-clinical samples or samples outside of veteran study. And then that then lends itself to integration and community support afterwards, where often they will become kind of lifelong friends, like following the retreat. And then, yeah, we've also recently started a study working with Athlete's Journey Home with Ian McCall, and basically kind of like MMA fighters, mixed martial artists, kind of boxers, people also kind of suffering from quite severe kind of traumatic brain injury, different extreme sports as well. But that's kind of just starting out right now. I don't have any kind of data to share, but I'm very I'm very excited for the direction that is going. Yeah.
Yeah, we have plenty of veterans coming through as well. We don't have specific retreats dedicated just for veterans, but it's something that I'm planning to eventually create. It's just haven't happened so far. But that bonding that veterans experience going through war together, or anyone that experiences going through adverse experience together, I think some of it is replicated at an ayahuasca retreat, just because even just a random group of people, they come and they are, you know, purging together, and they're like staying awake at night together. It also creates a bit of that, and I think contributes to an overall bonding of the group on ayahuasca, because, you know, you do have ayahuasca experience which are very challenging, and then knowing that you did it together makes you like each other more somehow. And another thought that comes to mind when you talk about the science is like, we already know it works, right? We hosted more than 2,000 people now, and I've seen so many times people coming and getting better. But now we need science to sort of prove that it is really happening. It's like guilty unless proven the otherwise, right? So that's how it feels like. I am actually also looking to eventually start doing some science. So I don't know, maybe if you know some scientists that are looking for a retreat venue where they want to do their science, I would be open. Yeah, let's, because I just came from MAPS, and at MAPS I was connecting to some people to try and see if I can get some science, because I know it works, and we have the Google testimonials people can read, but it's not science. Now we need to measure it, and yeah, if the world is full of skeptics, and I was a skeptic myself, if that's what we need to do, let's do it. But I know when the time is right, the science will find us. So, yeah,
I mean it as well. Link in. I mean, like, oh, we're connected now anyway, but definitely one thing Onaya are opening up to more is working with other retreat centers and, opening up the data collection. And yeah, there are a few that we're already started kind of like conversation with, raising money for and expanding the study. And from the scientific point of view, is always helpful to have multi-site comparisons in different traditions with different facilitators, and can really help us triangulate that, what we're seeing is not just within the one kind of like paradigm, right? Because what we really want to do is, as we try to retain the tradition in it, we want to see how many different traditions that are yielding this sort of results, and how the environments and the ceremony and the practitioner actually can then go on to impact the therapeutic outcome. So yeah, definitely open to potentially collaborating on that side as well.
Yeah, let's do this.
On that note, I would really also love to kind of speak to your curanderos as well around what they would like to research. Like, one thing we do on Onaya is we've set up like an indigenous advisory board, and basically the curanderos and maestros that we work with to share with us what they think we should focus the research on, and actually how we can then translate that into science. And some things are harder than others, obviously, like, oh yeah, research immortal plant spirits, that's quite hard. But then relatedness to nature, or even like the power of the Icaros or something, that's something that we can try to find workarounds to do really cool, interesting studies on, more like dream, for example.
Yeah. No, definitely. I'm very, very interested. And there's quite a big difference between Colombian ayahuasca tradition, or specifically this tribe that we work with, which are called Inga, as opposed to Shipibo, because number one, Shipibo ceremonies are in the dark. Inga ceremonies are, you have candlelight and you have a fire. And then Shipibo sing Icaros to individual people. Our shaman, he only sings Icaros to the medicine, and then when he does the cleanse. But apart from that, it's music. It's actually like, we have a band, like 6 people band. It's so it's not always like loud music, but it's a very musical tradition where, as a ceremony starts, music starts playing, and it gets first it's one person, then it's 2 people, then closer to the second part of a ceremony, it starts to get more melodic and more rhythmic and more instruments, and it kind of ends up at the crescendo of like a very celebratory music. And but the results are the same. People get better. So I'm just wondering, which part plays, and it could definitely be interesting to study it, maybe get some numbers behind it. But yeah, so you said, you studied epigenetic changes. So talk first, like, explain to people what is epigenetic changes, and then how can ayahuasca change your genome, and like, should people worry?
Yeah, so that's very preliminary right now. We were the first to look at DNA changes in any psychedelic, and epigenetics is the kind of upregulation or downregulation of certain genes over time, impacted by environment and life and experience. And essentially, we know that things can really, most of the time when we see kind of epigenetic changes, it happens over a long period of time, and is very incremental. But then sometimes big events will then happen in your life to change the course of it, and then that will get encoded into your DNA. And one of the things that we have been finding is, even on a relatively small sample, starting to see changes in the genes, so on the genetic level. So basically, ayahuasca and that ceremony being that big kind of like catalyst to that change. And right now, even I think the first study we looked at, we had about 60 people, and we were already seeing some upregulation, and methylation of the sigma-1 gene when related to trauma. So, for example, related to kind of like encoding of memory and recall and emotional regulation, previously kind of like done in kind of rat studies and things. And right now we are on the process of expanding that. Because essentially genetic studies typically require numbers of up to the hundreds before you can statistically confidently say that this change is actually happening. So more research is definitely required in this area. But one interesting thing is when we spoke to the curanderos about the epigenetic side of the study, obviously they weren't kind of familiar with DNA, so we're just kind of explaining it. And then Don Rono, our maestro who we've been working with, he was basically like, that makes a lot of sense and is exactly like what I've been doing in ceremony. This sense of kind of like clearing ancestral lines and straightening those ancestral lines. We're like, okay, yeah, that's pretty much what's happening. Yes.
Yeah, different language, same meaning. Because shamans, you know, they are the scientists of their little arts. Like a shaman is a scientist and a musician and a politician and everything all together. So yeah, I know you yourself now. You're a scientist, but also you have your own shamanic journey, and you're a musician. So how are you combining it all, and how do you balance out, you know, the scientific sort of dryness with the spiritual complexity? Anything you want to talk about in that direction?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, like, for the most part, I don't find it dry. Like, I really enjoy it. But it's just, yeah, when you spend too much time on the computer just writing, like crunching up, the numbers are actually, maybe it's my Asian side, just stereotypically into math. But like, like that, the numbers really speak to me and they tell a story to me. And there's something that I really love to see, and how it can both on a, you know, help to generalize across a number of people, but also show incremental change within the individual as well. And it has that kind of micro, macro, ability to everything as numbers. And then I find the best way to kind of blend it all. It kind of just is I'm really grateful in how well is kind of merged as well, especially when I am in a place where, you know, my work is varied enough that kind of like keeps me interested. Like I get to go to the jungle and be there and, you know, witness these changes, and then seeing the numbers, and then seeing that, you know, the follow up over time. And then it's just, you know, I think it's something that I feel like it's something that the world really needs as well. Because just like we've been speaking to quite a lot of retreat centers, and I think a lot of them share this same kind of concern or interest, actually, you know, like, you know, we know this works. We just really need to find a way to kind of translate it or publish it or show the world that it works. And I feel that is an important kind of like role to take. And what makes it much more bearable is just amazing people in my life. A really good team, a really great team of assistants and other scientists and universities worldwide, and just the Onaya family is, yeah, they make everything so good. And I'm so grateful for them. And then the whole thing just has this whole very kind of like integrated, holistic, artistic side to it as well. Like my musical journey has been completely shifted since researching ayahuasca. For example, I had never really thought about music from a healing perspective before sitting in ceremony, and then being exposed to the surgical knife of the Icaro and how well it can, provide that sonic container to the people, what the individual or the group needs, and freestyled in real time for these people. And that bit blows my mind, like just very specific intentions and melodies and rhythms for specific ailments that people are going through. And bringing that then into the research space, I have a band, shout out, United Freedom Collective. So like we bring those sorts of influences from the jungle into the studio as well. And then obviously the diets, the plants, our plant friends that we make along the way, and then being able to call that in when I'm like playing a show or something, or in the studio or something. It's just so helpful to how I navigate through the musical journey. Yeah. And then studying that in research, I pinch myself often when I wake up, the luck I've had in the blessings and to be able to do this work and meet people like you and amazing people who are on this path together, and bringing healing in this time when there's so much chaos and madness in the world. It really grounds me, if anything. It's like, for example, during that whole Hong Kong revolution movement that happened, like I felt so helpless, like during the whole thing, like what can I do? And the research and the work with ayahuasca really grounded me, just kind of like, okay, there's a lot of trauma happening, there's wars going on, there's displacement going on, there's a whole mental health crisis. What can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And then it always comes back to, okay, heal. What can I do best to heal? This is the thing I can keep focusing on. So yeah, it brings a lot of meaning to my life.
Yeah, by healing yourself, you heal others. So a lot of people want to sort of first clean their neighbor's yard before cleaning their own. For a medicine musician, and I mean, I'm not a musician, but I play guitar and I sing songs, and I went to musical school when I was younger. I think it's a common trait between Eastern European parents and Asian parents. They send you to musical school and chess, and you expect to be good at math as well. But I mean, there's definitely some influence, I assume. But normally for a musician, the compliment is like applause and people enjoying it. But what I realized for a medicine musician is when you play medicine music in a ceremony, the best compliment is when people start vomiting violently. Because it means that there's something in vibration of your voice that moves stuff around. And I also understand that playing music in the ceremony is not just a musical act. When I am about to play a guitar and sing some songs, I set an intention, and it's kind of like I'm with my music. I'm trying to also, like, together with the sound coming out of my voice, there's also something else coming out of some other parts, but it's basically like throwing like a net, like a, energy, so to speak. And let's talk about that part. Like, you're a scientist, but you also do Tai Chi, and there's energy, and like, we have energy as, the car moves, and it takes chemical energy from the fuel and transforms it into mechanical energy. Not that kind of energy. I'm talking about, the spiritual energy. Like, are you able to make any sense of it? Can we maybe eventually measure it? Like, what is it? Talk to us about that.
Very good question. Yeah. Well, I think let's start with the experience of it before going into the measure of it. I think when working with energies in the ceremony space, it becomes such a kind of like intuitive fine tune almost of reading the room, right? And what's going on with everyone. And I really love your description of kind of like the positive characteristics of the medicine music, and it's really it's not supposed to be a performance, not there to kind of sound good and grab your attention, and is really there to kind of like to guide and to help provide that container for you to go through whatever you need to go through without kind of like taking you out of your process and like, really in your face with like Icaros. But then as you are able to then tune into that sort of energetic space that's happening, it becomes this dialogue almost that happens between you, the medicine, your plants, and then the people in the room that you're directing your intention to. And often when I'm like singing in ceremony, if I'm like kind of like with someone who's going through a really difficult process, maybe like where I'm at in my training as well, and just not really great at grounding what I'm taking on. Like, I really feel super duper sick if someone is like having a really difficult time and I'm like trying to sing to help them through, but then I'm taking on too much and I'm like, I need to throw up. Like, I'm singing until I actually redirect my intention to the rest of the room, and then, you know, bringing in the community in, and then I feel much better. And conversely, if I'm with someone who's like feeling great and amazing, then that really kind of feeds off as well and can really kind of multiply that energy. And then obviously the energy of the plants that kind of, you know, that just mediate everything. There are certain, well, there are words and there are ways of kind of like connecting with the plant kind of allies. And the curanderos always talk about this Icaro line. It's like an energy line to your Icaros that kind of direct you to the diets and to these master plants that kind of befriend you. And the characteristics of these different plants, their way of being able to kind of like permeate what your experience is, or kind of like enhance your sensitivity to the space so you are able to kind of navigate. Essentially, I often feel that the connection with these plants are essentially a gift of their sensitivity, almost like being able to be gifted some of the things that they have in their kind of experience as being this plant, right? And then the Icaros are like a really important module in being able to kind of then translate that to a more tangible vibrational kind of format, to be able to kind of like use that in ceremony. So it's a lot of this, in dialogue, in commune, and kind of translating into other energies as we go. And so much of it is like, really follow intuition. And I think you can always tell when someone is in that like really kind of performance space, or doesn't really read the room too much, or is kind of just like a bad DJ almost. It's like you're not really picking up on what people are going through, and is more intrusive than helpful, and really trying to kind of navigate that space with more balance. And obviously this stuff is so metaphysical. How do you measure that in a tangible, quantifiable way? And we've had an idea on that, actually. And we've started on this idea. So as part of the indigenous kind of advisory board, they were like, look at the Icaros. The Icaros are like really important. You know, that's the power, that's the energy. And then we're like, okay, how are we going to study the Icaros? So one of the ways that we thought of was to put an EEG cap, so like the neuroimaging cap, on the curandero and on the participants with consent from everyone, of course. And then in real time, record the Icaros, and the EEG. And then the next day also do a qualitative interview with the curandero in listening back to the Icaro, like what was going through your mind, what was your intention during this part, or just kind of like isolate different parts when they were singing to this person, when they were singing to this person, and then really triangulate and then correlate the neurological changes with what's happening in the Icaro, obviously translating all of it as well and kind of time stamping it to the neurological changes. So we've just recently started that study. I'm very excited about it. I'm quite confident in it. It's quite a far out kind of thing to trial, but let's see what happens. Yeah.
It's a very, very cool idea to study the sounds, and they can like see if there is any parallels. Maybe like shaman's brain state, change it from like whatever beta to alpha. I don't know enough to give an opinion. And then the patient's brain state changed as he was receiving the Icaro. There will be, I guess, a good finding if there's some form of synchronization. I want to ask you a question that, because of the diversity of your understanding and views, you might not have like a cookie cutter answer. So how does ayahuasca healing work? How does one get healed with ayahuasca?
Definitely no cookie cutter answer to that. The way ayahuasca healing works, I often like to frame it in a very holistic kind of way, you know, and there's no one answer is ever the answer, is my answer. And it's very holistic. One framework that I like to think of by is kind of like this biopsychosocial kind of spiritual kind of model, and how all of these different aspects are very kind of like interconnected. And ayahuasca healing can work through the biological, like healing of ailments, healing of your body, through shaking, through sweating, through purging, through cleaning. And then obviously that has this knock-on impact on everything else. Or psychologically, like going in from the traumas, the relationship with memories, repressed memories, or even kind of like thinking about emotions that one can embody, to help them be confronted in a safe space to a lot of these things that have permeated their lives for many years socially. Then going off, like without the community is so important. I've always kind of had a thing with that whole kind of like, body, mind, spirit, trio of words. It's really missing community. Like community is so essential of, you know, our interrelationship with other people, like the interdependence. You know, it's like a very Buddhist thing, right? Like we are our relationships, and if we just go back to toxic relationships, like broken homes or communities that don't support you, then it's not sustainable. What are you going to do? You're definitely going to go back to relapse. And, you know, and then spiritually, and actually recognizing that the thing between space, you know, the way that everything is then interconnected by this energy, and having spiritual practices that can help facilitate that. Thinking about meditation, having ceremony, having ritual in your daily life, being able to work with mindfulness, like having more relationships with plants, and actually beyond kind of like human connection. How can we also uphold the spirit of everything? And with that sort of level of understanding, that would then seep into every kind of aspect of your life, you know? So my answer to that question is, yeah, ayahuasca healing can work on all levels, from the acute to the long term, and is a very kind of intelligent medicine, and how it kind of slowly clicks into place over time through these different kind of like modules are, yeah, I don't think we'll ever get to the bottom of it, but here's to trying.
Yeah, ayahuasca is one of those things, or psychedelics in general, where there's no point of like, okay, I figured it out, now I'm bored now. I think the longer you drink them or consume them, the more complicated it becomes. Waifung, thank you so much for this conversation. I think it was really interesting and very unique. Yeah, is there any parting words or any other question you want me to ask you? Or, yeah, just tell people more about you and where can they find you and your work, or if someone wants to support your studies, where can they do that?
Oh, bless, Sam. Thank you so much, Sam. I appreciate you so much for all the work that you do. And yeah, my closing really is just gratitude. And yeah, to everyone listening, yeah, please feel free to find us on all platforms. I guess, like, we have a website, www.onaya.io, and also onaya.science for all research and kind of like educational and kind of prep and integration needs. We have a course. We do like a mentorship training in psychedelic kind of mentorship to help people with preparation and integration. It's like a 6-month accredited course if people are interested in that path. And also we seek to provide kind of help on the bookending, kind of safeguarding and harm reduction side of the psychedelic experience. And then, yeah, keep an eye out on our socials, handle onaya.io for everything to do with our research and upcoming projects. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Guys, you've been listening to Ayahuasca Podcast. As always, with you, the host, Sam Believe, and I will see you in the next episode. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to support us and psychedelic renaissance at large, please follow us and leave us a like wherever it is you're listening. Share this episode with someone who will benefit from this information. Nothing in this podcast is intended as medical advice, and it is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This episode is sponsored by La Huayra Ayahuasca Retreat. At La Huayra, we combine affordability, accessibility, and authenticity. La Huayra, connect, heal, grow. Guys, I'm looking forward to hosting you.